everybody, it's Dr. Eric Balcavage. We're back for another edition of the Thyroid Answers Podcast. And today we have another guest. Her name is Dr. Manny Kukreja. Did I get that right?
Very
close.
Right.
All right.
Yep.
My name gets butchered all the time. So I try to do my best, but I don't think you're Polish. So it doesn't flow as easy for me. If it was something with Z's and W's and lots of consonants and no vowels, I'd probably be really good, but I think I got it close. So you're on the podcast today. You have a new book out, relatively new book out called Age Stronger, Live Longer. And it's a practical guide on how to maybe optimize your health and live healthier longer. I think that's the big thing, right? Live healthier longer, not just live longer. So welcome.
Yes.
Yeah. So welcome to the Thyroid Answers Podcast. Maybe the place to start is to get a little bit of your background. Who are you and why should we listen to Dr. Manny?
So, Eric, my name is Dr. Mani, and I am a medically trained wellness entrepreneur, wellness advocate, and I have my own business called Live Age Well, where my mission is to basically help women over the age of 40 to optimize their health by all the lifestyle strategies. It comes to sleep, gut health, hormonal health, and, basically following those bio-optimization techniques. That means all those science-backed strategies and wellness strategies that goes in alignment with your own biology. So when you follow that, 70% of the disease, you can already intervene there, and actually that helps to prevent the disease at the spot. So I help women for that. I am medically trained, and then I kind of just shifted into the public health field, and I majored in women's health. And from then my focus became purely women's health. And I help women over the age of 40, because they are the most vulnerable group that I feel that they are lost with the information, they're lost with the awareness, and they are the particular vulnerable group who are actually around by the age of 40. They are anyway dealing with the symptoms of, graying of hair, fat accumulation, especially around the belly, loss of flexibility, joint pains. And, when these symptoms, they just think that these are the symptoms of aging, and they blend with the symptoms of aging, and they just assume that they are aging. And that becomes, that becomes their ignorance. And I tell my patient, it doesn't matter what age you are, whether you are 20, 30, 40, 50, 60s and beyond, your mind and your body, they continuously thrive to become better and better if you have the full knowledge and awareness of having to know what can really help you by following some of these strategies. And we'll delve deep more into those strategies, but that's what I do. So I focus a lot on gut health. I do focus a lot on sleep optimization and hormonal replenishment. Anything that we can do from functional nutrition to sleep optimization, hormonal replenishment, and taking care of your mental stress and mindset, and cellular repair. So all these are 4 or 5 of my pillars that I go.
Yeah, I think those are critically important in my work and in my book. I talk about what I call fitness factors that go along with what you say: dietary fitness, habitual fitness, emotional fitness, mindset fitness, relationship fitness, financial fitness. Like, these are all of the categories that we're either working on and improving, and that results in improved health, improved longevity and longer health span, or we're not doing a very good job working on those. And the weaknesses in each of those categories contributes to the stress on the system and the kind of the downward spiral of our health, the chronic inflammation. And really it's the chronic inflammation and oxidative stress on the system that we lose the ability to regulate, that really contributes to the aging process. And I think you talk about that quite a bit in the book.
Absolutely. And that's what I tell my clients. When these 4 or 5 pillars, which are the foundation of your good health or optimized health, when you're able to take care of these foundational pillars, and then just move on to your supplements, and that too, not blindly just follow any stack or any protocol of supplements that you are seeing on Instagram, social media. Just don't follow people blindly, because I feel every supplement that your body need is very personalized need or requirement. It's a very, very individualized need. Get your testing done. You can just blindly follow what you need just because your friend is taking or other influencer is taking that supplement. Just see what your body needs. Listen to your body. So first follow the basic lifestyle and then go for the designer lifestyle. And this is what I teach them. And definitely you already touched on what is exactly going on in the body, the scientific process that's going on in the body that's aging us. And that's where people get lost. The inflammation is the huge factor. It's a huge factor that's aging us. And it's unavoidable. It's like it's the part of the process. I mean, we are sleeping, waking up, maybe gardening, mowing, anything that we are doing in it, even thinking and focusing and making any work happen. Every moment, our cells, our bodies, they are going through biochemical processes. They are constantly working, they're constantly multiplying, they're dividing not only the cells but also the organelles which are present in the cells. And that's a huge stress on the cell itself. It's a biochemical process. Our cells are going through the biochemical process in order to generate the ATP, the energy that our body needs all the time. And because of that biochemical process, there's a constant production of ROS, which is a byproduct of these biochemical processes. And ROS is called reactive oxygen species. And they are those molecules which actually causes the constant oxidation. And then because of that oxidation, these ROS are basically affecting our major macromolecules, that is protein, nucleic acid, and lipids. And when they damage those macromolecules, which holds pretty important role in doing so many functions in the body, when they damage these proteins and lipids and nucleic acid, that means there's a damage to our hormones, to our enzymes, and to our DNAs. And that is this whole process of this whole process of disturbance of homeostasis starts, and that disturbance of homeostasis in our cells and in our body is when the process of disease begins.
Yeah, and I think that's the important part. In my followers and the listeners, know that I talk about this quite a bit, and we typically have two big operating states in our physiology, maybe three. One is homeostasis, right? Which is, hey, I make enough energy from the food I take in to run all of the systems of the body appropriately. And even though we make free radicals and as part of the normal metabolic processes, I'm able to make the antioxidants to manage the free radicals. And so we're in balance. We call that homeostasis. The challenge in today's world is most people aren't in homeostasis. We assume that we're in homeostasis, and if I just take an individual ingredient or nutrient, the body will use it appropriately. But when we're in allostasis or operating from danger physiology that's picked up by our mitochondria, the physiology has to change. And we start to have an imbalance. This starts to contribute to the imbalance of the free radical production versus the antioxidant production. And as that becomes chronic and persistent, then that leads to degeneration and decay. So I want to touch on this. I hope you put it in your book, so I'm going to bring it up. If you don't want to talk about it, we won't. But you talked about finding out at some point along your life journey that you had Hashimoto's or hypothyroidism. What did you learn from that experience, and how did that shift your thought process about human physiology and your diet, your lifestyle, and your behaviors?
So actually, that was the beginning point of the change in my lifestyle. And that is because, what I do, that is the reason I wrote the book, because I felt that there was a need to bridge this gap and to bring these, because even if a lady or woman or a person is a layman, educated person, professional person, businessman, businesswoman, whatever, they have, it's a human mindset. What we see on TV and social media, we kind of follow it. But unless you really understand what's really going on inside your body from physiological aspect, you do not know how to manage it. And there are many things that you can manage even without going to endocrinologist and following the protocol there. And this is exactly, I mean, I'm a physician, I'm a medically trained doctor. This is what exactly at what I was at the peak of my career. And, very busy, overwhelmed life. And then I had a child who was just born with the young child. And then, I'm a type A personality, trying to achieve. Obviously, my body inside was going through a lot of stress. I mean, when I say stress, it's just not the stress because of the oxidation processes going on inside the body, all those biophysiological processes going on inside the body. It's a lot of mental stress as well, which
Hmm.
causes. And I figured that, and then I had an attack of the viral herpes,
Hmm.
and I knew that there's definitely something wrong. And we had made a move from New Orleans all the way to Milwaukee, so there was a constant change of the
Hmm.
environmental factors as well. Simply just moving from a hot, humid place to all the way to a place which is like full of snow and very, very cold. So obviously my body was just not able to take so many changes. I'm, juggling with my high engaging career. I had a baby, and then I had moved from one state to another with completely different environment in a new job. And then, there are some people who kind of just go with the flow, but I am a type A personality. Definitely, I am a high achiever. So because of all that stress, I had an attack of shingles, and very bad, in a way that I was literally on bed for 10 days with no energy, nothing. And then I definitely, as a medical doctor, I did go for my investigation, and that's the first time that I had ever done my antibodies test, because, as per the protocol, medical protocol, I was just simply going by T3, T4, TSH, thyroid panel testing every 6 months in my life, as an
Hmm.
annual physical checkup. But I'd never tested my antibodies because, at that time, 7, 8 years ago, it was not that. And now we all talk so much about getting your antibodies tested as well. So I got it tested. My antibodies were I mean, they were 2000 versus I think the normal optimized levels should be around 9 or 10, within that
Hmm.
range. So my TPO antibodies and thyroid antiglobulin antibodies were like, they were on steep rise.
Hmm.
And so there was a way that my body was telling me that there's definitely something wrong. And that something wrong was basically immunity. So my immunity was at risk. I mean, my body was at risk, and my immune factors, my immune system, your immune system in your body always detect for the terrors, or if your body needs to fight for the war, if there's a danger from some external, either pathogen or external stress.
Hmm.
And definitely my body was on constant attack, and because of which I did also experience a lot of IBD. And I could sense this. My body is trying to tell me there's definitely something wrong. I did quite a lot of research. I went to 2 or 3 doctors, but there was not much response. They were just, okay, do this for your viral overload, take this antiviral, and your herpes is going to settle down. Hopefully that there are no, there's no spread of that virus to any other parts of the body. And I did recover in 10 to 15 days, but then after that, I had my thyroid was constantly abnormal.
Hmm.
I mean, even if I was taking high dose of thyroid supplementation, it was never controlled. My TSH was extremely high, and my antibody was constantly high. Even though my body, I was feeling well, I was feeling healthy because I was out of the viral attack and I was okay, I was functioning normal. But then I had persistent IBD. I mean, the moment I would have a stress or anything very stressful going on in my body, I totally, my body totally rejected gluten at that time. Because what happened was that, because of that stress, the immune overload was so strong at that time that all those T3s, all those, cytotoxic antibodies were pretty high at that time, that anything that I would eat is not acceptable by my gut. would be basically traveling to your blood, and it's going to detect them as a foreign material or a foreign toxin, and body will actually produce a overload of those immune cells.
Yeah.
Like
So
your body telling you that I'm always ready to fight with those toxins, you know?
Yeah.
So, and I think that was the reason my thyroid antibodies were just so much that they were attacking my thyroid all the time. And then is when I detected, I came to know that this is all Hashimoto's thyroiditis.
Yeah, it's interesting, especially coming from that model, coming from an allopathic model. And a couple of things I want to just kind of highlight for the listeners. When you're talking about the immune system, right? The immune system, and a lot of times we think, oh, I've got Hashimoto's, my immune system's attacking me. I'm not a big fan of having that philosophy. I think the immune system more often is trying to protect you. And I think that's what you were trying to express. When people would say, well, I have a high level of stress, I don't have those things going on. Stress is not bad in general. It's the load of stress. And probably in your situation, a lot of stress, you exceeded capacity. And now the immune system is going, okay, I got to defend. More than likely, your Th2 cells were dominant at that point in time. And normally we think Th2 anti-inflammatory, but when Th2 really gets ramped up, we got a lot of antibody production, we got a lot of histamine response, we get a lot of food reactivity, food sensitivity, and that was just your immune pattern probably. And so those antibodies sky high. But for the listener, I think this is a really important point. I talk about this a lot, but it's really important. A lot of times people assume they don't have Hashimoto's because they don't have positive antibodies. And I would just caution, you still can have Hashimoto's, you can still have thyroiditis, but you're Th1 or Th17 or CD8 cell dominant. And unless you run an immune panel, you wouldn't see those things. But those are the types of immune cells that actually create a lot of the damage to the thyroid gland. And so you could be no antibodies, but really have a lot of thyroiditis going on. And sometimes it's not until you start to actually improve and restore balance to your immune system. Then all of a sudden you see your antibodies pop up a little bit and you're like, well, now I have Hashimoto. No. You had thyroiditis going on the whole time, but you were just Th1 or Th17 or CD8 dominant. Those were the cells that were creating the inflammatory damage to the tissue. And now that you're starting to restore, the Th1, Th2 system starting to kind of balance itself back out again. And there's some antibodies. And a lot of people think about the TPO antibodies like they're the thing that are causing the damage. They really don't cause as much damage as those inflammatory T cells do. Those inflammatory T cells create most of the damage. So I think it's interesting you came from that model. You come to this model like, hey, something's going on. The initial, and maybe part of the reason why you were struggling with thyroid hormone support was that the stress response was still in gear, right? Your mitochondria, which we'll talk about more, are still sensing threat, danger, immune system still dysregulated. And if you put more thyroid hormone into a system that already was, and I would say adaptively regulating to the stress response, it may not work the way you wanted to. So labs don't go into the range. Why I'm taking all this T4, TSH isn't coming down because your cells aren't converting T4 to T3 appropriately. So they're still getting those signals of T3 deficiency. Pituitary is still saying, oh, we still don't have enough T3. And and I think that's where people can get
Eric,
stuck.
and this is exactly what happened because my endocrinologist, he put me on like 150 mcg and then still nothing. I kind of just tapered it down. You are very right. It's just not the T3 and T4 overload that I needed, right? Mm-hmm. So now I am literally on 25 mcg, like minimal. And I kind of just, and this is without asking my endocrinologist, I kind of just waned it down like slowly because and it's been going on. It's a work in progress going on for last 1 year. I see my condition, I keep checking my levels, and I'm kind of just waning down on that T3 and T4. The supplementation, because maybe my body doesn't even need that. It's just somewhere else that I'm kind of just trying to monitor. Yes.
I'm glad you said it because it's a thing I've been doing for 30 years is helping people recover from thyroid conditions. And what we find is we start addressing what we often talk about in functional medicine is the root cause issues. We find that this immune condition that, hey, there's nothing you can do, actually you can restore balance to your immune system. You can reduce the damage and attack on your thyroid gland, and you can improve T4 to T3 conversion, not manipulate it with medication, but because of, hey, what are the things in my life that are contributing to my load? Hey, I'm type A, so I'm driven anyway. I'm not getting the sleep I need. I'm overly focused on lots of different things that are adding up to the stress. And many times we don't pause and say, what are the life and lifestyle things I can reevaluate how I'm doing things on a day in, day out basis that are just continuing to create the stress load and keep me stuck in kind of this danger physiology that keeps my immune system upregulated, keeps me from converting T4 to T3 appropriately. And my guess would be, in your year journey, you've started to figure that out, that it's less about trying to manipulate a lab value into range with hormones, and it's more about addressing lifestyle factors
100%.
that really, even though they're not sexy, those are the things that contributed to the dysfunction to begin with. And that is the solution to get out of this chronic immune inflammatory cascade that ultimately creates excessive levels of oxidative stress and problems.
Yes, no, I totally agree with you, everything that you said. And that's exactly what happened when I tried to manage stress. I would be stressful anyway, but at least when I tried to manage my sleep, sugar, and stress. These are the three S that I tell my people that, these are the main three triggers, which kind of just led me into lack of sleep, so much stress, eating sugar, and eating some of the food that my gut maybe didn't like, all those factors contributed to this so much. And at that time, I used to do my blood testing 3 times in a year. Now, kind of just do it 2 times in a year to basically constantly manage. I just go by the numbers. It's just, I'm a data-driven person. I've done clinical research for 15 years, Eric. And unless I see the numbers, I see the report, I never get convinced. So now, and at this point, to tell you, I don't have any endocrinologist that I go to. I just manage it by myself because it's so much, and I have experienced this in the last 5 years, so much to do with all those lifestyle factors, which holds a big place in the management of this autoimmune problem.
And I would guess that from a medical perspective, right, their job is to manage the condition, right?
Yeah.
And at some point you're like, okay, the management's not working. I want to try and recover. What do I have to do to recover my thyroid physiology and my immune response? And ultimately, it is all those things that you talk about in the book, what's happening lifestyle wise that I can change that's going to improve the condition, improve my T4 to T3 conversion, and reduce the immune damage on the thyroid gland and allow that thyroid gland to recover. So many people are told that they can't recover their thyroid gland function. That's not true, but we often spend too much time trying to manipulate a TSH into range with medication. But if we're constantly giving thyroid hormone medication, then that suppresses TSH. If you suppress TSH, then there's no drive for the thyroid gland to work. And so, yes, in a pure management model, it's hard for a thyroid gland to recover. It's even harder to calm the immune cascade because you're not addressing what's driving the immune cascade to begin with. But that's the allopathic model, and not to blame anybody, but that's the training. This is an autoimmune condition. We don't know why it occurs. It's going to destroy the gland. We just give you what the gland can't make. And when we shift to a functional perspective, at least to some degree in the functional perspective, we still have managers in the functional perspective, and they'll just try and manage T4 and T3 with medication. But again, the principle is the same. Why is this occurring? And if I address the root causes, then I can restore thyroid gland function. I can restore conversion. And the other thing that goes along with it is all those conditions that are associated with cell stress, thyroid dysregulation, glucose resistance or insulin resistance, adipose storage of calories, compromised liver function, detoxification function. When we address the stressors, mysteriously, those things get better Right. Right.
I'm happy you brought it up, and coming from you, I really appreciate that. And it's such a beautiful message to the audience and listener, because you are a thyroid doctor. And this is exactly what I've been trying to say. I mean, it's just not you need to keep on loading yourself with the medication, just thinking, because there's something else going wrong in the backside, in the backstage.
Right.
But just we are just looking at the front runners and then trying to load it. I mean, just the same example as depression. We kind of load patient of depression with SSRIs, that's not what is needed, because we are basically loading them with SSRIs that are trying to inhibit the uptake of serotonin, but we need to make sure what is really going on the back end, and that is what we call the functional medicine perspective. I mean, our allopathic protocol is good; it's great. I mean, when there are hundreds of diseases, thousands, where I know that allopathic treatment is the solid treatment that you need. But there is so much that's going on the back end that if you combine that functional and integrative approach, I think they just work so well together. Plus,
I totally agree. Yeah. And I think, and early on, I would have, I've been like, but there's situations where we need crisis or acute care, get the person safe, but we shouldn't stop there. We should be able to say, okay, look, we've got this condition managed. You have hypothyroidism. There's not enough T4 in the system. We got to get some in there. And if that's all the person wants to do is manage their values, great. Stay in that model, and we'll continue to manage your dysfunction as they pop up. But for the person who wants more, we have to be able to offer, hey, there's a reason this occurred. It's not what I do as an allopathic physician. It's not in my kind of wheelhouse of what we do, but there is a profession that is focused on that. That's the functional medicine side. So we can get you to an area where you're safe. We can manage a condition, but if you really want to recover, you got to work on lifestyle factors. These are things that is really the wheelhouse of the functional medicine profession. And we can work together in that process instead of butting heads saying this is better than this. Both are needed, but it really depends on what the individual client is looking for. So we have to offer both of those things. And when people come to see me and they say, hey, I want to get off thyroid medication, I'm like, okay, well, if you want to be able to have a chance to get off thyroid medication, we have to understand what's creating the excessive stress load, reduce it or eliminate it to the best of our ability, and then support the recovery. That's going to take work. That's going to change. That's going to require change in habits, change in behaviors, change in lifestyle, change in thinking. And do you want to do those things? No. Okay, then you need to stay in the allopathic model and manage it. If you do want to work on those things, then yeah, let's get busy working on those things. Let's monitor what's going on with your labs and your medication, and then let's work with your prescribing physician, since I don't prescribe. And as we make improvements to diet and lifestyle, we're going to see that the medication you needed a month ago is maybe inappropriate today. And the medication load you needed 6 months ago is inappropriate. And so as we start to heal and repair, hey, I'm on 3 blood pressure medications and now my blood pressure is too low. Right. Because we reduce some of the inflammatory processes. You don't need as much blood pressure medication to measure it. Let's go back to your doctor with your tracking of your blood pressure, and let's see if we can't get that medication reduced. Hey, medication's better. My blood pressure is better. Fantastic. Let's keep working on the journey. Same with thyroid hormone, same with blood sugar medication, same with depression, whatever it is. Yeah. You don't have to be stuck on a medicine-based model, but if you want to get off of that roller coaster ride, you actually have to commit to making life and lifestyle changes, even for the person who thinks they're doing everything right, me included. I found out I had Hashimoto's in my 40s, limited sleep, 4 hours a night. I thought that was a badge of honor, lots of training, coaching, running businesses. And you're like, you just think that this high productivity is like, this is the badge of honor, right? I'm driven. And then you quickly realize, like, even though I'm eating well and I'm exercising and I'm doing all these things that seem like they're beneficial, what I wasn't doing was recovering. And when I wasn't allowing myself to recover, I ran my labs just to see how healthy I was, and hey, I got Hashimoto's, I got glucose resistance. Like, what the heck is going on here? But it wasn't that I didn't have a lot of good habits and behaviors, but there was key areas: disordered breathing, poor sleep, time, and recovery that was getting me stuck in a cell stress inflammatory mechanism, and my body was trying to adapt. I just wasn't listening, or wasn't aware of the symptoms, right? It's just that pain or that ache is just from just heavy training yesterday, like whatever, right? But you can do a lot of things right, and a lot of the things we do can be stressors, unless we don't allow for recovery. Then those things that we call good stress actually contributes to dysfunction. Would you agree with that?
I totally agree. I can just, so you said it so well, Eric. It's just not like, being a normal person, like I'm healthy, like I'm right now 52 and my biological age is quite less than what I am. I am like 32 biologically. Even though, those kind of concepts, I don't believe much, but then yes, at the chronological age of 52, I am 32 at biological age. Very fine. I know I have tested all my I have seen my genetics. I've tested my organ testings and trying to see the organs age. Everything is all good, thinking that I'm doing everything right. But even till date, even till preaching everybody, advocating for wellness, writing this book, speaking on the stages globally, whenever I don't do right with my body, I tend to have that imbalance. Even I'm like eating the best of food, clean food, whole food, very optimized food, good quantity, not going over that much quantity, and great lifestyle, trying, just like you said, workout literally like 4 times in a week, 4 to 5 times in a week. I'm doing the best with me, thinking in my mind I'm doing the best. But there are many other things, if I don't follow them, all the good goings and good doings, they get imbalanced. Just like you said, not taking enough recovery time and sleep. Sleep was the major factor. And I struggled with sleep a lot, Eric. I think, just like you said, for me, that was the badge of honor. I was doing right, but I was just not sleeping enough. Just sleeping 5-6 hours in a day is like, it's like it's a way to basically call diseases at your doorstep. And that was the worst thing that I was doing with my life, just because you said, we are trying to meet up with the career and with all those goals that we need to achieve, So the balance is the right way. And same thing, and this is a balance in the lifestyles, that if you're eating right, working out right, then you have to be recovering right with the help of. Same thing is inside our body. Inflammation and oxidation, I don't call them bad guys, because they are the part of the processes that goes on inside the body for a reason. Inflammation is always a good stuff for a reason. It helps us to protect us from the bad guys, from the bad things, from the bad stuff happening. It's like a guard for my body. Oxidation is a good, it's just, what bad is, the bad stuff is when they go out of harmony, when they go out of balance, that when my inflammation becomes chronic, then is the point that I'm like, starting to suffer from the diseases. And when my oxidation is out of control, and I have more oxidative stress, then my body able to produce antioxidants to fight with those oxidative stress, and oxidation is going at a higher rate than what my body was designed to. That is when the disease occurrence starts to happen. So it's like inflammation, oxidation, they are, as a part of human body, they are designed to be there for a reason, from God's evolution of the bodies are designed. But it's just all about the imbalance. And that is the reason I wanted to write in the book, because what you and me are talking, we are talking as doctors, we are talking as, the wellness advocate, we are talking from a lot integrative approach of the medicine. But, normal, even the educated people, even the educated women, they do not know this. There's always a cookie cutter approach, When it comes to medicine, it's a cookie cutter approach. When it comes to following the stack of supplementation that they need to ingest, it's a cookie cutter approach that my friend is doing that, influencer is doing that. These are the 6 or 7 supplements that it's never a similar approach that I feel. It's always a bio individuality. And it's always like your own body, maybe what your body needs and what my body needs is totally different.
Right.
And that's why I believe, just check those titers, check those lab panels. They've been made for a reason. And I don't see, I don't see any negative. I don't call it a negative approach to be testing my blood panels 2 or 3 times in a year. 3 would be too much, but I definitely make sure that I test them 2 times in a year, in
Yeah.
order for me to know what's really going on inside,
Yeah.
especially stage, at this.
I think it's really important, and we'll dig into that. I want to talk about some things in the book, and we'll get to kind of labs and lab values and things. And we also have to consider, especially, I think we're more at fault in this in the functional medicine space, that we've identified what we call optimal and functional ranges and say, this is where you have to be. And unfortunately, the labs are never the problem. The labs tell us a story about what's going on in the body, and to force a lab value into an optimal range, whether it's with medications or supplementation, doesn't fix problems many times. Many times it actually contributes to problems, because the lab value isn't the problem, it's the story. And if you only look at a lab value and go, oh, that's a problem, I'm going to fix it, that's like ripping one page out of your book and saying, I know everything she talked about because I read this one page. You don't, right? So we have to look at it, labs, and interpret them. And especially when it comes to thyroid numbers, like people think in our space, TSH needs to be between 1 and 2. And I'm like, no, it doesn't. It does not. If you're older, that TSH is going to tend to be a little bit higher, because that's the natural trend. There's more oxidative stress. The thyroid gland needs to help with make a little bit more T3 than T4 for those people, because of the reduced T4 to T3 conversion due to the oxidative stress. So we don't want to be necessarily manipulating. If their TSH is elevated a little bit out of that 1 to 2 range, not suppress it. Let's ask why. Do I have enough T4? How am I getting enough of that T4 free? Is my T3 uptake high or low? That's influencing the conversion. Is there inflammatory stuff going on? So we have to consider that lab values, when we look at them, tell us a story. And some of those lab values, when we talk about longevity and length and lifespan, that those values can change as we age, because of just the normal aging process to some degree. So I want to make sure we get into some of the stuff on your book. And one of those things that we talk about, maybe this is a good segue about aging. You talk about I think it was 7 things you associate with somebody maybe aging too quickly, if that's the right terminology. So what are the big 7 things that you call the agers, things that cause us to age maybe faster than we should?
Mm-hmm. So just like the very first one that I talked about is the inflammation, oxidation, decreased in the capacity for detoxification, because as we age, our body's detoxifying mechanisms are not that strong, because our enzymes get damaged, right? Just when, as I said, because of the oxidation, the enzymes, the hormones, those macromolecules, the nucleic acids, they get damaged, right? There's a disformation in the composition of those, and they get damaged. And so these are the 3 main factors, basically: inflammation, oxidation, increased oxidation, and decreased detoxification, because of which our enzymes are getting, they're not as active as to be performing their functions. And the enzymes, the detoxifying, in the process of detoxification, enzymes are they play major role in detoxifying. And then besides that, because of these 3 major processes, the damage to the nucleic acid, mitochondria and stem cells, so those get affected, so decreased in the ability and the production of the stem cells, and also the enzymes, and then the hormones and the mitochondria. So all these are the major factors, but they come along, but they are still called as, they are included as the reasons of aging in those 7 agers that I have mentioned. But mainly is the inflammation, the increased inflammation load, and the oxidation.
So is it truly years of age as the cause, or is it the habit and the lifestyle that creates excessive inflammation? Because I think we generally would say that the body's capacity does decrease in time, just from a normal lifetime perspective. But the reason I want you to clarify that is because somebody might say, well, I'm getting older, so I need to take anti-inflammatories. I'm getting older, so I need to take antioxidants. And if I just do that, I'll slow down the aging process. Is it just time on Earth that's the problem? Or is it a combination of time on Earth plus the excessive load on the system?
I think both, but if you want to divide it by percentage of how much each impacts, I think it's 20% or 20 to 30% by the time on Earth, and a lot to do with our lifestyles and the other factors.
Yeah.
So it's both. But then the good thing is that, the one which is to do with our lifestyles and factors is easily manageable by our own self. I mean, my time on Earth is not, that's my fate. That's something that is already a destiny. That's not something that I can control, but that's only 20 to 30%. But this 70 to 80% chunk, which I can control, is all in my own hands. And this is what I can control. So it's both. And, and I say both, and that's the reason. You see, if I am 52, maybe I'm much better than many 32-year-old looking individual. Or if somebody, or for example, you just mentioned 60, I mean, you look like 40. Or sometimes you are in 40 and you look like you have a body decelerating at the age of some 60-year-old. So it's not really a lot to do with the time on the Earth, I believe, but a lot to do with the lifestyle factors that you follow in your life.
I totally agree. And that's where I think because if people would say, if it's just time on Earth, then I'll just take a bunch of stuff to try and, biohack my way out of it and not deal with those habit and lifestyle things. So that was number 1. There's 6 more. So let's talk about those. What are the other 6?
Oh, you mean the 6 agers?
Yeah.
Oh, I kind of just made them, I kind of just fused them together.
Oh, okay.
Yes. So I that's what I call my 3 main agers are inflammation, oxidation, and increased inflammation, oxidation, and decreased detoxification. And the major factors for that is just like, your rate of autophagy, and then your mitochondrial dysfunction, your stem cell activity and their number dysfunction, so they all come along with those big points that we talked about.
So because there is immune inflammatory mechanisms going on, there are definitely things that people talk about supplementally to try and kind of manage those things. I think we've already kind of talked about life and lifestyle factors are really important. That's the 80%. So if we're talking about 80% of the issues is habit, behaviors, lifestyle, diet, let's hold the supplemental stuff that people might hear and go, oh, I'm going to take this. What are the biggest movers that somebody today could say, okay, if I want to slow down my aging process, where should they start? I mean, you might say they need to read my book, but like people, like what, where do you think those foundational things are that they say, okay, this is where I need to start. These are the foundational things I need to start doing today to slow down my aging process? What would those be?
Excellent question. And this is the question. My book has 10 chapters. I can go on and on those chapters. But when I try to, like, for example, if I'm going to go speak for 40 minutes, I cannot cover the whole book. And, the very first thing that I talk to people, especially when I'm talking to these women over the age of 40, My basic mantra is movement. Movement is medicine. I call it
Mhm.
medicine. And for a reason. And the reason is human body is designed to be moving all the time. A non-moving body is basically a dead body. So, for example, even hunter-gatherers, everybody, human, even animals, everybody who's moving because they are going and looking for the food. I mean, in order for the survival, you need food, right? So for even making the food, look for the food, gather the stuff for the food, and then able to make it, and then, eat it for your survival, everything requires movement. Everything requires movement. Even as per the evolution, when a child is born, when the child is born, immediately after that, the child cries, your lungs move. The child's cardiovascular system is constantly pumping the blood, and that's telling us that this child is an alive
Mhm.
infant, right? And this child moves the legs and arms, trying to show us the symptom this child is alive and moving. So moving body is always a alive body. So movement is so important. It's just like it's like a medicine for literally everything, for every root cause. I mean, how many people, as just for the very recent study in Lancet in 2023, the people who are stationary and not moving enough, they have 24% increase in all-cause mortality, because of which people of that nature, they spend 20 years of their latter part of the life, they spend 20 years in the medical setup, going through doctor's follow-up visit, hospitalization, treatments. I mean, you imagine, I mean, that quality of life is not a good quality of life, that those 20 years, right, when you retire, you've kept those 20 years to be meeting up with your bucket list, to be spending time with your granddaughters and grandkids and grandsons, and
Mhm.
enjoying with your spouse and doing all that. But if those 20 years are spent in taking medication, going to the doctors, waiting for doctor's visit, and hospitalized, and having go through all those interventions, those 20 years, that quality of life is not what I will actually ever prefer for me.
Mhm.
So movement is the cause. People who are not moving and very stationary lifestyle, they have 24% cause of all cause mortality, and all those chronic illnesses like obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, Alzheimer's, and cancers and whatnot. And so moving body, and that's why I call, when movement is so important, it's basically a medicine. So that is where I start to basically talk to my clients, that if a client comes to me that this is what my problem is, where would you start working on me? Movement becomes, obviously supplements, everything, they come later. I mean,
Mhm.
when you see what is deficient in them, but movement is where everything starts with. And then, because my most of the client population is a women population, when I start about movement and then I go through the algorithm, going
Mhm.
down the algorithm, I see if movement is so important, what are the two main things that they need? Obviously, they need strong bones,
Mhm.
they need strong muscles, and then they need good nutrition in order to support good bones and muscles. And then besides that, they also need some recovery time. That means they need good sleep. And that's how I go down the algorithm, and then I try to manage them that way. And then whatever comes along with that, then any supplement needed for good sleep, or what is needed for good nutrition, what is needed for movement, what kind of exercises they should be, then we kind of just make the whole protocol based on what that particular person's requirement is.
Yeah.
But what I think, and especially women, why I focus more on women, when it comes to bone health, women becomes vulnerable to the decline in bone density right around the age of 40. When they are actually in that phase of perimenopause. Perimenopause, people who are listening, is around 10 years before you hit menopause. So menopause on an average age is around 50 to 52 years. So by around 40, these 40 to 50, that age is called perimenopause.
Mhm.
And then when you see the decline in estrogen, you know I tell my people to understand on a basic, very easy concept, is that until the age of 30, your bone is doing all good, your bone density is fantastic. But right after the age of 30, every year you lose bone density, every year. And right 1% every year. And then when you are at the age when you actually hit menopause, you have a 20% loss in bone density within 5 to 7 years of that menopause. That's a huge decline. So when you know that this kind of physiological stuff, being a woman, is going to be a part of your life, why not we do particularly those kind of exercise which takes care of your bone density? And then I tell them, rather than basically just going and walking, I mean, if you have, obviously walking is beautiful, it's a good exercise. Making 10,000 steps a day was the kind of norm that was created, which gives us enough exercise in a day, and that was for a reason. That means that you're walking easily 45 minutes 4 times in a week, and that gives you around about 300 and 350 minutes of that amount of basic exercise that you need. But, if you're a woman and if you're in the age of 40, then make sure that you're doing impact exercises, because impact exercises, just like dancing, running, if you can't run very fast, just run slow, jogging, and then box jumping and jumping. These are all the impact exercises that when you put pressure on your bone and you tell your osteocalcin to be stimulated, you tell your bone density to become stronger. You tell your bone, your bone at that time when you're going through the impact exercise, your bone senses that it needs to get stronger. That's a sensor. And so if you are giving me a choice that you have only like 3 days in a week to exercise because you got to be making a lot of things happen, rather than swimming, I will go for impact exercise. Rather than running, I will go for resistance exercise and weight training, because I want my muscles to be strong. I want my bones to be strong. Then I will focus a lot on weight exercise, and resistance training. If I want my bones to be strong, I will definitely do impact exercise. And then also I tell women in this age that, most of the falls and fractures, around 80% of the falls and fractures, which happens in the old age, that happens because of loss of balance, loss of equilibrium.
Yeah.
That's what I tell, and people ignore it. I tell my people to be following this protocol that definitely do the equilibrium exercise. And that is just like, when I'm brushing my teeth, I'm standing on one leg. In order for that brushing duration of 1 minute, standing on one leg, I am basically training my whole body and my body weight and my mind to be basically learning how to balance. And that's very, very important. People ignore it, but this is very important. Single leg deadlift without or with weight is so important to be learning those equilibrium or balance exercises, because you are training your brain and you're training your body to avoid all those falls and fractures that happens in the latter age. And the impact of those falls and fractures is so bad, because 80% of falls and 80% of fractures basically, in whether it's a male or female, it happens because of fall. And when that happens, your quality of life is so bad. 30% of the time you die in hospital. And 50% of the time, if you've had the falls and fractures, you never come back to pre-fall or pre-fracture status of living, So when the quality becomes so bad, then why not particularly focus on those kind of exercises, which improves your whole body and your mind, and it tells you to be stronger. Because bone is just not a bony structure that gives me the skeleton. It also, what it does is, bone produces a molecule called osteocalcin. And osteocalcin is a stimulator or is a stimulant for BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, because there is a connection in between bone and brain. So when you have strong bones, you will have enough osteocalcin. Your osteocalcin is going to stimulate BDNF. That means your serotonin, your dopamine, your cognition, all those three things are going to be improved. If you have a good serotonin, you're going to be a happy person. If you have a good dopamine, you're going to be motivated to be making things happen all around you. You would not be depressed. If you have a good cognition, you're basically fighting with those all old age related problems like dementia and Alzheimer's. So you need to have those three. And bone is the basic factor. Is the foundation.
I want to touch on this because you talked about estrogen, and I think this is kind of a challenge in today's world, especially in the functional space. We look at women and we're putting so many women on HRT, and there are a lot of women that have low estrogen. And I guess my argument with low estrogen, if it's low, women's estrogen is supposed to decline as we age. I mean, just as ovary production utilization goes down, estrogen, the need for the same amount of estrogen goes down. And there's a lot of people, however, because of dysfunction, have really low estrogen. And I'll talk to patients and they'll be like, I'm like, why are you on estrogen therapy? Well, I'm doing it for my bone density. Okay. But just taking estrogen on its own is not going to necessarily lead to increased bone density. You actually have to do the things that are going to drive bone density. Estrogen will support your mitochondria. Estrogen will support bone production. But if you just take estrogen in a state that already had inflammatory mechanisms or downregulation, excessive downregulation of estrogen production, more doesn't just fix it. Just because you optimize the lab value doesn't mean you're going to have improved bone density. And you may know from your research that, oh, no, it can, and I may be wrong. But my argument for them is if you're just doing it for bone density and you're not doing physical training, physical activity, weight-bearing exercise, and I totally agree with you. We need to do a combination of things. We need to do slow cardio. We need to do some fast cardio. We need to do strength training. We need to do balance training, yoga, Pilates, whatever it is. But we have to do all of those. And if we reduce the inflammation and we do physical-based training, especially weight-based training, that's going to probably have the biggest factor in increasing your bone density way more than taking HRT on its own. Well, I could be wrong.
No, you were very right. You were just on the spot. I mean, this is, how we started our talk of the allopathic protocol mixed with the integrative and functional. And that is what makes if I am just supplementing the patient with that hormonal replenishment because that patient needs it because her estrogen is low, that alone is not enough. There's a lot of lifestyle factors that comes along because that impact exercise, that bone density, those kind of exercises are so much more important to increase the bone density. And at the same time, you're replenishing because estrogen was low, you're replenishing your estrogen, and estrogen is anyway going to take care of the bone density. So everything goes hand in hand together. Right. It's just such a fusion of those two kind of protocols. And you're right. I mean, we can control of implementing that estrogen patch and giving the patient the estrogen patch. But, for that patient to be doing those impact exercises and the bone-oriented exercises, that is her protocol that if I'm teaching her, I'm training her, I can only teach her. I can make her aware, but she needs to be following those lifestyles. And when that happens together, the magic happens.
Yeah, I agree with that. And there's a lot of discussion on HRT, and we won't get into that today because we just won't have enough time. So we talked about physical fitness is an important factor to slow down the aging process. Nutrition, important for the aging process. And so we want to talk about that. There's lots of diet religions out there, but based on your research, if we had to give people a very simple explanation of what is a healthy diet, what would your simple explanation be? Because some people would say, well, you have to be carnivore, you have to be keto, you have to be vegetarian, you have to be vegan. What's your research found as probably the healthiest diet that all of us, especially as we age, should follow?
I think, Eric, what has worked for me and what I have done the research for past 14, 15 years and all that wisdom and an education, what tells me, and that's exactly what has worked with me personally. I know there have been so much, this kind of diet, that kind of designer diet, and this keto diet and that diet, but nothing really. Even if I follow by discipline and rule, but after some time, I have a tendency to get out of it. Mm-hmm. I'm not stick to it, and that's how the human mind is. You cannot just stick to those diets for years, right? I mean, they are just there to try and experience. But I think the mixed diet, taking enough protein, that works for me. Well, it doesn't matter if it is a vegan or vegetable-based protein or animal-based protein. I take chicken, I take fish. Obviously, I don't do the red meat I don't know why, but yes, I do take seafood, and then all the dals, the lentils, and combination of so many vegetables that I take, because they are full and loaded with antioxidants because of their phytonutrient nature. Definitely, I eat very clean, but my mantra is also this, that I just don't exceed my diet at a time too much. I mean, my amount of food is just not too much in a plate at a time. I mean, my body doesn't work that way, and everybody knows their body. But definitely, when it comes to the composition, I take enough protein. I take not too much carbs, but I definitely take a lot of antioxidant-rich food, especially the vegetables of any color. I take all my colors, and particularly I tend to go for the darker the color, the better it is. Whether it comes to fruits and vegetables, the darker the better, because of the more polyphenols in them. And reason for that is because I don't take extra supplements of antioxidant. I try to gain all my antioxidants from these natural foods, from the vegetables. Plus, also, I don't take any probiotics supplements, because even if we talk a lot about probiotics, but for me, when I think from science point of view, it doesn't make sense, because your microbiome. I mean, there are trillions of microbiome in my intestine, in everybody's gut. How can you just take one probiotic and follow that for 6 months and try to think that you're able to meet your needs? I really don't think it's advisable, and it makes any sense. So what I do is I try to take vegetables. I try to take prebiotics, but everything in the form of food. I take there's an Indian curd that I mean, I don't even go and eat store-bought Greek yogurt. I eat the yogurt because I am from Indian descent, and I eat the yogurt that's made at home. And that has enough microbiome. And then I do definitely eat kimchi. I eat a lot of fermented foods. We put our onions in a lot of there's a process called fermenting those onions, which are delicious, and at the same time they are just like adding any accessories on some other bland food, and at the same time they're full of that yeast. They're full of those microbiome, that when they go in the gut, they do their function. Because by doing that, I get so much diversity, the microbiomes, than just buying my probiotics from a whole food and just sticking to that, just some particular kind of uh, probiotics and those microbiome or those bacillus, which may be even alive or dead, who knows? I do not even know the potency of those bottles which are sitting in the grocery places or at the Walgreens and CVS. I have no idea. So I rather take it from my food. And that is the reason I eat mixed kind of food. One is because of the astaxanthin and antioxidant purpose. And also second, because I want to just gain as much as microbiome diversity from that food itself, because I know what I'm doing and I know what I'm eating and how is it going to be beneficial. Plus also, I'm also getting enough fiber, because if I'm getting enough fiber from the food itself, rather than chugging that powder fiber, which I hate, I don't do that. I just literally try to grab everything, all those nutrients, microbiome, fiber, and antioxidants from the food. And that's why my food is a variety of food. It's obviously clean, it's whole, it's organic food, and it's no seed oil, less sugar, no sugar, but then it's a mixed variety of food in order to gather as much as nutrient content from the food itself.
Yeah, I think it's great. And that's what I say all the time, that any of these kind of food diets, you radically change your diet, it can radically change signs and symptoms if you're struggling, because it's going to change your microbiome, at least temporarily. But when you have a carnivore only diet, right, then we are missing something. And we're not just feeding us, we're feeding our microbiome. And so I think like a whole food Mediterranean style diet, where exactly how you explained, is probably the best place for most people to be long term. The different types of diet, AIP, keto, vegetarian, those short-term changes where they're more restrictive, can be beneficial to change signs and symptoms. And we can use them as a tool to make some immediate changes. But long-term, I think from a longevity standpoint, eating a whole food-based style diet, Mediterranean, or as we're explaining it, is probably the best for most people long term.
That's
And
very cool.
there is some discussion, and I'm definitely a protein eater, but there is some discussion in the literature, and I don't know how well it's validated, but it does look like earlier on, maybe when we're younger, maybe an animal-based diet is more beneficial. But then as we age, shifting more to a little bit heavier plant-based diet may be more beneficial as we age. I don't know if you've seen the same literature, but
Yes. And I am very happy that you brought on that, because sometimes when I'm on the podcast, these are the questions which are kind of just missed, and that information gets missed to the audience. I love that question so much, because not that many people would talk about it. I have seen that literature. And you know how I can relate to it, Eric? It's just that when you are younger, more protein-based diet is good, because your growth hormones, and you're into that anabolic and building phase of your life. Your hormones, your body is building more and more cells, and totally, I mean, you're primed with those hormones that are leading your body to be building, and you need a lot of protein. And when you get older, after 50, I mean, you can just hunker down a bit on that protein rich diet, because one, that I'm not saying that your body goes into catabolism, no, or your body is not doing any more anabolism. No, it's not that, but you are not basically into building stage. So you do not need that much protein overload to be overloading your kidney. Many people might disagree with me, but I'm just talking about that research, that literature, and I'm trying to connect why. And also the other reason is, but when we are not so carnivores, definitely that means we're eating a lot of vegetables as well. That means a lot of fiber content is coming in, and a lot of antioxidant content is coming in, and you need more antioxidant when you are getting older, because in order to hunker down your oxidation. So one, anabolism, the other, the need of antioxidant is more in the latter years of your life, in the older age, in the midlife and later. So that's the two factors and reasons that I'm thinking is kind of just giving me the answer for the literature that you and me have read.
I want to touch on this too, because it is kind of a controversial topic, and that is fasting, intermittent fasting. There's, a lot of people talk about it. Some people say it's not good for people, especially people with hypothyroidism. They shouldn't calorie restrict. They shouldn't do fasting. I don't know that that's necessarily the case. I think we have to look at where somebody's metabolism is in general. If they have a downregulation of their metabolism, they're not going to be able to process the same amount of caloric load because the metabolism is already downregulated. Some people would say that people with hypothyroidism shouldn't fast because the fasting creates stress on their physiology, and they should eat more frequently because it helps regulate blood sugar. I'm not a big believer in that necessarily, but in your research, where do you see the role of intermittent fasting? I've had other people on the podcast that say, hey, the intermittent fasting doesn't really support autophagy until you've fasted for 3 days or so. But what do you see as the reality of utilizing intermittent fasting as part of a healthy lifestyle?
You said it very right. And I think in one of the chapter, I have written like this, that, intermittent fasting may be not a good choice for people who have hypothyroidism or who are dealing with metabolism related, because their caloric load is not that much. I mean, they might not need that many calories, or people who are very young and athletic, very, very young, very athletic, their calories need maybe so much that you don't need to be fasting, or other women who have PCOS, So, scenarios like this, the ideology of fasting kind of just alter. I totally agree with that. But I think you're very right. It's the scenarios that we have created in order to explain the patients and clients. But you're right. Everything kind of just is centered to your metabolic needs, either your athletic, hypothyroidism, your PCOS, your estrogen dominance. How does fasting plays a role? That is all, different explanation. But metabolism is the center that tells us the need or no need to be, I mean, is fasting going to be beneficial to us or not? But I totally agree. in order for autophagy to begin and initiate, it's a 3 to 4 days of fasting, that when your body, because you have so much storage in your body, even if I'm fasting for 1 day or maybe just like, 18 hours in a day, I'm still not hitting that stage of cellular cleanup,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's just the constant 48 hours or more. As per the literature, it says that, 48 hours of more of fasting is needed in order to hit that state where you kind of just, into the phase of cellular cleanup or autophagy, the beneficial part of the beneficial uses of the autophagy. But then for me, again, I follow the intermittent fasting, 16 to 18 hours. That works best for me. I cannot just fast for 48 to 72 hours. It's not my thing. But everything that we read in literature makes sense. You can totally connect to the concept, and it makes sense. Yes.
Yeah, I think it's a tool, right? I think it could be used, and I think we believe this concept that we have to constantly be eating, but I don't think that's how we're designed,
Yeah.
right? We were designed to, hey, I'm hungry, I'm going to eat. I don't have food, I can thrive. And so I think it's a natural process to not be eating every 4 hours, right? Every 5 hours. We that's just not the way humankind developed. Yeah, I don't think early man and woman were sitting around going, oh, my sundial says it's 9 o'clock. I should have had breakfast by now. Or, oh, it's noon. I have to sit down and have a lunch. Or, we survived for thousands of years eating based on what was available, what we had, when we had it. And true, we're under a whole different load of stress today than we were maybe back then, but they had their own different stressors. But I think the body is designed that when we don't eat, we have stores, we utilize the stores, and we should be able to adapt if we're in a healthy state. But I don't think that the human physiology was designed that we have to eat on, I got to eat every couple hours to manage my blood sugar.
2,000 years ago, I mean, these people used to eat maybe just once in a day, only when their body felt hungry and they had a need to just eat when you need food and you have a hunger. I mean, you have enough hunger to eat food, and that's how human body was designed. And that's why you see, I mean, the rate of metabolic diseases was not as high. And obviously, other problems like infection, this and that might be much more prevalent than what it is nowadays. But the metabolic related diseases were just not even a thing at that time. This is how our body was. But nowadays, you're right. I mean, we are socially involved, we are eating and we are drinking all the time. That's not what our body needs. So that's why I think it's a beautiful tool. One is following the discipline, explaining and training your brain to be disciplined, to be eating only when you need to eat. Second is, it's a great tool for calorie restriction. People who are trying to better their body composition, it's a great tool. It's a calorie restriction, but in a very organized way. Intermittent fasting is a very, very good tool for calorie restriction in order to better or improve your body composition. And then the consequence of which will be better metabolism and the less risk of metabolic diseases like diabetes, obesity.
Yeah, because is there really a need for the body to unlock fat stores if you're constantly putting nutrition into the body, right? Like, what's going to cause the body to say, oh, we're going to release some of this fat and use as energy? Oh, well, there's food constantly coming in. Why would I ever
exactly
unload, right?
So true.
Yeah. So unfortunately, we're at the end of the conversation. Time goes really fast and quick. So what I'd like you to do is just kind of give some people an understanding of where they can find out name of the book, where they can get it, and more about you and what you do.
And I'll just speak for maybe only 2 more minutes, if your time allows.
Sure.
Because we talked so much about the bone density and we talked about estrogen and women's health. And I mean, that's my area. And I am very I never want to miss one thing that I want to, because that's something that, as per the medical protocol, that information gets missed to be advocated to the women, especially over the age of 40, because as per the medical protocol, as per medical doctor, our orders of doing the DEXA scan would be around the age of 65. But I tell my clients and people who I educate to that don't wait till 65. That's just a long wait. And because by that time, the damage would have already occurred. Go for getting your DEXA scan, because DEXA scan is imaging through which you test your bone density, your fat mass, and your muscle mass. When I say fat mass, means visceral mass as well as subcutaneous mass. And it's very important to know all those four factors, especially for the bone density. Go when you get your first mammogram done at the age of 40, get your first DEXA scan done, just to have the basic numbers that how your T-score looks like. If your T-score is 0, that means fantastic. You have the bone as good as the age of 30-year-old women, right? But if your T-score gets to around -1, that means you're osteopenic. That means you need to be following those lifestyle strategies in order to work on your bone density. And if your T-score is -2.5, that means that's a very alarming signal. You need to be really going and seeing a doctor for some intervention now, and taking hormones or whatever your doctors suggest you to. So just get your DEXA scan done at the age of 40, and then when you hit your menopause around 50 or 51, then from there on, I tell my clients to be doing DEXA scan every once in a year in order to keep up with the bone density, in order to know what's going on inside your bones.
Yeah.
So that's one of the message I really wanted to not really leave, because I know we touched a lot on women's health, and we did a lot talking on estrogen and the bone management, bone density management. So I think getting your DEXA scan done is ultimate tool to optimize your bone density.
Yeah. And I'll just touch on that. And I would say the two biggest factors that are contributing to your bone loss is the lack of physical activity and exercise, and the chronic low-grade inflammatory oxidative stress going on. It gets exacerbated once you lose estrogen. It's exacerbated, but that's not the only reason. And so I want to hit that home again from my perspective, that if you're losing bone density, one of those two of the things that should hit your head right away is, why is this occurring? It's not just an estrogen issue. It's likely an inflammatory, low-grade inflammatory oxidative stress issue. And two, it's lack of physical stress on your musculoskeletal system, that you need to get those two things managed, or otherwise just putting the hormone in is a tool, but it's not probably going to get you to where you want to get to. Would you agree with that?
100% agree with that. And that's why I want to just add in the risk factor becomes even more, that why you should be a candidate of doing the DEXA scan and bone density management. If you have any autoimmune disease, if you are a smoker, or if you have a history of falls and fracture, you've seen your mother and grandmother having to go through those kind of scenarios, or if you are asthmatic patient and you are on chronic corticosteroids because of the management of the disease, or if you are taking corticosteroids because of any other management, definitely you are a high risk factor for loss of bone density. Definitely get your DEXA scan done in order to see where you stand.
I want to touch one more point on that, and this really relates to the people on thyroid medication. And part of this is, I think this kind of gets in the ire of some people, but there is research that people on thyroid medication can have increased bone loss. And I think it's not a thyroid hormone issue per se. I think for a lot of those people, they have immune inflammatory issues that created the hypothyroid state to begin with. They're not addressing that. Then they add the thyroid hormone on top of that process, and it alters the bone degradation and remodeling piece of it. And so I think that's why we see people on thyroid medication have greater bone loss. It's not because thyroid hormone's bad. It's because we still have this cell stress inflammatory mechanism going on. So we're having a problem with the breakdown and remodeling of the bone versus just hormones bad and creates osteopenia, osteoporosis. Have you seen literature about that?
Read about it, but then I'm happy that you brought it up and listening from you because you are the thyroid expert. I mean, that makes me, that's like, yeah, I've read about it, and the way you explained it is excellent, because you kind of just, because the thyroid hormones got to do a lot with remodeling of bone, how it's laid down. And that is what I'm relating. Yes, it makes so much sense. Yes.
Yeah,
Totally.
that's there's two real cautions I have with people with, sometimes trying to optimize or just more is better from a thyroid hormone perspective. One is the issues with bone and bone density, especially as we get older. And then number two is when we have sick cells, when we have cellular dysfunction, mitochondrial dysfunction, and we overload the system with thyroid hormone, one of the things that can happen is we can increase oxidative stress, especially T3 can increase oxidative stress, and we don't have time to go through the mechanisms, but even T4 binding to receptors on the outside of the cells can allow for cell replication. And there's literature out there, more and more literature now that's coming out that shows how people on thyroid medication, the longer they're on it, the greater incidence of many types of cancer. And this is one of the reasons I wrote the book, is because I believe that the hypothyroid state and the changes we see in thyroid physiology isn't broken, it's adaptive. And it may be a protective response from my perspective, but now the scientific literature is coming out and talking about how hypothyroidism may be the protective response to prevent sick cells from replicating, which then you look at I never thought they did actually do a study to look at how people on thyroid medication, their increased risk of different types of cancers would be done. I thought nobody would pay for that. But now we're seeing it more and more in the scientific literature. And so for me, that's a caution. More is not better. We should be asking the question, and if we can help restore homeostasis, reduce the immune, inflammatory processes, minimize the excessive use of thyroid hormone or forcing more hormone into a system that can't manage it properly, we reduce the risk of things like abnormal cell growth. We reduce the risk of excessive oxidative stress, and we improve health and longevity. So
Much agree with you, and I'm so happy that we touched on that topic. I didn't have much knowledge just because I said I'm not like a thyroid expert, but I have been on thyroid medication for 15 years since my second child was born, because at that time we detected I'm hypothyroidism. And then for last 1 year, I mean, I didn't totally stop it. I started to wane down from 120 to 88 mcg to 50, and now I'm off this medication, my levothyroxine, for past 1 year. And Eric, to tell you, I don't even feel a single day, I don't feel the lack of energy. I don't feel like my metabolism is slow. I don't feel any symptoms of hypothyroidism. I'm just doing great, exactly how I used to be doing on that medication. Whether I was on a high dose 155 to 88 to 50, and now I'm on nil, and my life is not altered at all. And and you're right. I mean, listening from you today makes so much more impact of my decision. And I mean, personally, I mean, just like our body tells that you're doing the right thing, I think my body told me that I'm doing the right thing. I'm feeling normal. Plus, also had searched on that literature, and today you talked about it. I am so convinced that I did it.
Yeah. It doesn't mean everybody should stop their medication
Yeah,
tomorrow,
yeah,
right?
no,
It's not,
it's not a message for everybody to follow what I'm doing, but yeah, definitely talk to your doctor for one of this option.
right. But I think the point is well taken. It's the point I make with my clients. It's the point you're making. If you address the life and the lifestyle factors that are negatively impacting your health and life and improve those, then inflammation goes down, oxidative stress goes down, thyroid signaling improves, glucose and insulin resistance improves, fat metabolism improves, so much improves. So it's really about life and lifestyle factors. So I'm glad we got a chance to have the conversation. So where can people learn more about Dr. Mani?
So I am on social media. My Instagram handle is dr.dr Mani, MANI.KUKREJA. So I'm always there educating people. I do a lot of lifestyle content, a lot of confidence, elegance, lifestyle, and definitely health optimization content. And then my book is being published, Age Stronger, Live Longer. It's been launched since last 2 months now. And I do a lot of keynote speaking on the stages. I do speak on the podcast like this, wherever I can actually, spread the information and awareness and education. I love to do that. And then my website has a lot of information with newsletter and blogs. And my website is manikukreja.com.
Awesome.
And then anybody has any question, they can get to my email through my website.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you coming on the podcast. It was a great conversation, and maybe we'll have you back on the podcast sometime in the future.
It was a pleasure. Thank you very much.